We're about to go into our second presentation, a world away from the first one. And welcome to Ellie from the Centre for Acceleration of Social Technology, CAST for short. I've been very privileged to be on a digital fellowship run by CAST for the last few months, which has been a real eye-opener for me, not only because it has taught me an awful lot about digital and tech, but also taught me how you can plan for making your organisation more effective to using digital methods. I've come across something that might come up in Ellie's presentation, the concept of tech for good, which seems to fit the benevolent fund sector very well. So Ellie, without further ado, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. And it's great to be in a room with so many awesome people doing awesome things. I love this job. You just get to meet more and more organizations changing the world in ways you never even realized was happening. So yeah, thanks very much for the invite. I just wanted to give you a bit of warning. We're going to have a slightly interactive bit at the beginning of this session, which hopefully will wake anyone up who's had their sort of morning coffee slump. Yeah, so if you have a smartphone, that would be great, but don't have it like immediately. I'll just give you a quick intro to what we're going to do. Gonna do some introductions to CAST, what CAST is, and then some of this interactive bit, then a bit of an introduction to tech for good and what digital innovation is, what we mean by that, and then some of the ways that we address this at CAST, and then how maybe we can support you guys. And I very much want this to be kind of the starting point for an ongoing conversation of how you would like to use tech more effectively, or digital methods, or even, as Dominic says, not even the actual tech and digital itself, but some of the thinking and the processes and the mindset that has come from the digital world, which we feel is tremendously beneficial for just general operations and sort of project management stuff. So, introductions. I'm Ellie, I'm from CAST. CAST stands for the Centre for Acceleration of Social Technology. It's not a very old charity. It's only about 2.5 years old, and it was set up by the previous executive team of Nominet Trust, which is the UK's largest tech for good funder. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll understand what tech for good means. So CAST was really set up to bridge this gap between very early stage and small scale approaches of using technology to solve big social challenges, and the ones that are achieving sort of a large-scale impact, of which there aren't that many at the moment. And the rationale behind a lot of the work we do at CAST is that by working with established non-profit organizations and the people that fund them, we're tapping into an extremely strong network who have an amazing reach, who have a strong reputation, who have unparalleled knowledge of the real complexity of the social challenges they're tackling, often because they've been doing it for years and years and years. But they maybe don't have so much understanding of the latest tech and design approaches. So we're trying to sort of upskill those organizations and the people in them to help them really sort of deliver more impact at scale, because we believe that technology is potentially the greatest tool for social change that we've ever had. It can really help kind of give a real boost to things if done well and if done in the right way. So that's a little bit about me. Now some understanding of your guys' challenges and needs. I'm going to ask any of you who have a smartphone to please have a little think about your organizational challenges, because part of what we do at CAST is really getting a sense of the people we're trying to support, which is you guys, which is charities, which is other types of funders. And I've got a bit of an interactive system here that I'm going to ask you all to log on to if you do have a smartphone. This is all anonymous, and it's all also within 140 characters. So obviously, I'm not going to ask you for reams and reams here. Just off the top of your head, what is a big challenge facing your organization at the moment? If you could discuss it quickly for a couple of minutes with your neighbor, and then if you do have a smartphone, log on to this site, menti.com, which Dominic's maybe you didn't actually use. You missed our first session, in fact. Okay, well, Dominic is also new to this as well, so this is awesome. Hopefully it'll work, fingers crossed. And you just go to this site, www.menti.com, and enter the code 253841. Has anyone used Menti before? Oh, awesome. Okay, well, if this works, you should hopefully all be quite excited by the real-time, buzzy nature of tech to garner opinions. But if not, then we'll at least understand our challenges from each other. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. And yeah, let's see what comes up. I'm going to duck out of this presentation a sec. Ah, there we go. We've got some nice results here already. I'm saving this, yeah. How do you what, sorry? Enter it. I think it should just, there should be a submit button. Was there a, whereabouts is it on the button? Just below the box where you enter them. If you scroll up a little bit. Ah, it might be not showing on different browsers. Okay, I think if you haven't written one in, then no worries. Ooh. We've got 10 responses so far. Hopefully this is enough to just, 12. Excellent, there we go. So I really like this tool for just a very quick kind of real-time poll of what people are thinking in the room, and it's a really great way to then kind of get ideas up on a board and discuss them. So we've got things around staff capacity, fundraising, awareness about the charity, sustainable funding, again, reaching hard-to-reach families, measuring the impact of grants, individuals and families, effective cross-communication between departments about member inquiries and cases, aging donor base and beneficiary group, interesting, aging beneficiaries again over here, another reaching hard-to-reach families, staff numbers and mother awareness raising one, governance of trustees, interesting, getting trustees to use technology, yeah, that's another thing that we're working hard on at CAST, and setting intended outcomes to allow for meaningful impact reporting. Okay, that is awesome. Okay, so it's good to know before we start trying to figure out what the best approach to solve any problem is, what the main problem is. This is one of the things that I think came out from your presentation as well, was like, if you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, then how on earth can you begin to understand how to solve it? A lot of the time in our sector, we get very excited about, especially in digital, we get excited about shiny solutions before we have necessarily really understood what problem it is we're trying to use them to solve. So we try and always start with this. So the next question, and I'm going to get you to use Menti twice more, but this one can be a very quick one, is going to be, what are your main challenges around digital specifically? So this is the question number 2. It's the same code. So yeah, just you can put like a 1 or 2 word phrase. You can discuss it again if you like, but this is really helping us, well, helping me right now understand who I'm speaking to and helping me understand, yeah, what kinds of challenges you're facing. So for this, it could be something, well, I don't want to put answers in your head, but if you think of digital and how you use it in your organization, what springs to mind as something that you would maybe like some help with? Okay, I'll give you another 1 minute for this one. It's just a very quick exercise. Never-ending snagging issues. Nice. Okay, we've got some great ones here. Oh, it's going to update as you submit them. Lots around databases. I'm sure this will not be a surprise. I have yet to find a database that is universally loved. But yeah, lots of really interesting stuff, but also around a bit of digital exclusion about beneficiaries. Are you able to reach beneficiaries through digital anyway? Understanding the potential of digital, whether it's understanding what the opportunities are or whether it's people in the team understanding. Never-ending snagging issues. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds horrendous. All these kind of little gripes, I think, is really interesting. Accessing data, lots around data. Cool. Okay, so hopefully this just gives a very quick snapshot, and then I've got one more, but I think I might skip over it just because of time. Oh, are you enjoying it now? Well, if you do want to have a quick look, it should be up now, and this one's got sliders, so I can talk through whilst you answer this one actually about, yeah. This is one around digital leadership, or sort of brackets digital leadership, because the program that we've been doing with Dominic is all about digital leadership, and it has each of these different sections, which at the moment might seem a little bit jargony. Some of the words in there might not mean very much to you if you're like any normal person and don't work in this stuff every day. So if you want to fill this one out, that would be awesome, really helpful. No need to necessarily do it right now, but this would give us a good sense of how people are feeling about each of the different aspects we cover on our digital fellowship. Because we feel very much that for organizations and the leaders, especially of those organizations, to be able to continually respond to the ever-changing needs and habits and expectations of their beneficiaries, whether the beneficiaries are individuals that you're giving funding to, whether they're communities that you're a part of, all the stakeholders that you work with, basically. Then each of these different aspects, having a good understanding of each of these is important. So we've got digital trends, organizational change, lean and agile methodologies. Those are a bit more sort of buzzwordy, but you may have come across those before. User-centered service design. So when you guys were talking, this idea of really putting the people that you're designing your things for at the heart of understanding how you should adapt your services and your practices. That stuff is so vital, and actually probably the thing above all that we champion at CAST. Working with data, I'm sure you'll put that very highly on yours. Social business planning, understanding how to get sustainable revenue into your organization, always a challenge. Commissioning and recruiting tech talent. Somebody had put cost as one of their biggest barriers, and I think there is a lot of problem with worrying about cost in tech, and that's a big sort of point for why people sometimes don't even begin to engage. Oh, and then the final one is the scaling and integration of new digital products and services. So we can begin to see already a bit of a sort of trends on what people feel more or less confident about, which is quite interesting. So if you would like to complete this after the presentation, that would be super valuable to us, because it'll help us understand if we do want to design some sort of response for you guys. And we're going to be working with Dominic in a few weeks' time to do this as well, and some of the other members and trustees. Then we'll know what to focus on, basically. So thank you very much for that. And then I'm going to whiz back to this presentation. So introducing tech for good and digital innovation. What do we mean by this? So we start with a huge number just to sort of get people a bit confused. What does anyone think this corresponds to? Has anyone got any guesses at all? Ah, nice one. I like that. It probably isn't far off, to be honest. One's with an exclamation mark at the end as well. No, it's actually, it's impossible to guess this, but this is the number of Google searches every single month. And I find this a staggering number, 1.4 trillion Google searches every month. And we use this number to represent just the massive scale of change that has happened in a decade, actually. Google wasn't even around that long ago. And suddenly everybody's way of finding information has just fundamentally changed. Finding support, finding help online, understanding what services might be available and relevant to them. And so if the third sector doesn't understand this big change and adapt their organizations and their services accordingly, we're really missing out, basically. We're missing out on a huge opportunity to respond to how people's behaviors have changed. Because actually the digital revolution isn't about shiny apps and websites, cool as they can be. It's a kind of it's on the scale of a second industrial revolution. Some people even call it the fourth industrial revolution. If we start out with kind of steam power and then mechanization, and then we've got sort of digital computing coming in the 60s, and now we're at this level where we've got networks, we've got the internet connecting everybody all the time to the entire world's information, which is amazing, but can be very bewildering. So it's about sort of helping your communities navigate this. And it's a fundamental change in the way people find information, other people and support, how people organize themselves, and perhaps most importantly, how people make their decisions. If something comes up to them through a channel that they're using all the time, and very few people don't have any digital devices, even if it's a very dumb phone that just sends SMS messages, that's still a channel that you can reach people on, which can be really, really valuable and help you reach those hard to reach groups. But unfortunately, the mention of cost earlier is possibly because we've got a lot of these in the sector, which is white elephants, which is examples where tech has been very expensively built and then not massively relevant and not very well used by people. And unfortunately, that comes about because can be the greatest research done beforehand. I love this picture, into what needs to be built, and it can be beautifully executed and it can like serve the purpose lovely. But if it doesn't respond to how people actually behave, then almost all of the value is lost. And that seems like such a tragedy when we're always competing with tiny resources anyway and trying to get the most out of the least. And also another thing to say about this is that this might have been what the people that you were designing for said they wanted, but it might not be how they actually behave. So there's a really subtle distinction there. A lot of the time when people survey to build a new piece of technology or question people, they say, what do you want? And there's this famous quote from Henry Ford that if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I think actually that's so true in tech, and it can lead people to design really well-meaning, well-intentioned things, but if it doesn't actually understand their existing habits and behaviors, it might still be wrong. And another way that we can kind of get around this is, these are kind of quite boring corporate-y slides, I apologize, but this is the way that things used to be built, this sort of waterfall methodology, where you could end up with a gate that nobody used, or an enormous expensive database system, for example, that nobody used, where you'd do a load of research at the beginning, you'd plan it, you'd build it, maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years down the line, you'd finally come up with a thing, and then find out, oh, it doesn't quite fit the needs. Whereas what we do now in what we call agile delivery and agile development is looking at this in a process of iterative cycles, so that at each stage you can do a little bit of finding out what people want. You can build a tiny, tiny, cheap thing, test it, learn how people are using it, and then review it. Actually kind of iterate on that thing, tweak it if necessary, abandon it completely if it's not working at all, and nothing's too far lost because you haven't spent that much resource and time and money to begin with. And you do these little cycles of iteration of building things in order to make sure that what you build is more relevant and effective. And it's kind of this sense of sort of learn, then build, then measure. You've got a load of assumptions going into anything you build. This also fits so much for not just digital stuff, but in general. And I think actually as a sector, we're really good at understanding this for non-digital things. We're very thoughtful when we design our services, and we do a lot of research into understanding how the people that they affect will behave. But sometimes when tech is involved, this kind of goes out the window for some reason, and we think, oh, that charity or that funder has got a really shiny thing, and we could use that, but maybe that's not quite applicable to your situation or your users. So we do a lot of learning, then we build the thing, then we measure how it's being used. And it's all about this test-driven approach, which you guys explained perfectly as well, this kind of using the evidence to shape how you then change your organization, change your behavior with the users, your end users, the people you're funding, the people you're supporting at the very center of it all. And I love this picture as well for explaining it really nicely. What this represents is if the challenge here was, I need to get from A to B faster than walking, traditionally, we would probably do this approach where we'd think, right, okay, A to B faster than walking, that sounds like we could build a great Rolls Royce with leather seats and cup holders and a CD player, great. And we'd maybe like ask for the government or big lottery fund or someone for funding to build this thing, and they'd be like, okay, cool, you go and build it. And then each of our teams would work on like one team on the chassis, one team on the wheel, one team on the fancy CD player. And then at the end, we'd deliver this beautiful Rolls Royce and everybody would be like, great, that's awesome. But actually, if you want to get people from A to B faster than walking, the quickest, cheapest thing is to give them a skateboard. And if that works, then great, you've solved their problem. It might not be the best way to solve that problem, but you've delivered some value for basically very little resource. Then if they give you feedback that the skateboard is okay, but it's a bit wobbly, then you can add handles, make it a scooter. If they want more speed, you can make it a bicycle. If they want even more speed and they want to go vroom, then you add an engine, make it a motorcycle. Then if they say we're getting wet in the rain, then you can turn it into a car with a roof. But at any point in this process, they might say, actually, that's fine. That's fulfilled what I actually needed in the first place. So I think this is a really interesting way. We talk a lot as a cast about like, what's your skateboard? What's the smallest thing you can do that delivers some value and enables you to go back to the people you're designing stuff for and test and get that feedback. Because it might not have been a scooter that they wanted at this stage. It might have been that they needed just a longer skateboard or something like this. And you never know until you actually build the thing and give it to people and test it. So we've also got a really difficult task that we're trying to create 3 types of value in this sector. We've got the user value, by which we mean creating things that people actively choose to use. We've got financial value, has to be financially sustainable. Either it needs to generate revenue or it needs to have some sort of way of revenue coming into the project. But we've also got this social value, and that is the bit that you guys were talking about of understanding like what's the impact, what's the social benefit of the thing that we're doing. And sometimes the user and the social value are a little bit at odds with each other as well. Like I might know that I should eat really healthily or I should call my mum every day, but I don't necessarily do those things. And so sometimes if you're tapping into people's behaviors around the user value stuff, you have to bear in mind that there's a bit of a trade-off and a balance between that kind of ultimate social value that you want and actually getting people to use the thing that you're building. So it's hard, it is really hard, and that's why it isn't that's why you don't see brilliant tech for good approaches everywhere. But we've got a model that we use at CAST, which we get a little bit pretentious. Sometimes we say this is the triple helix of social tech innovation. I didn't come up with this, I hasten to add. Where we've got these 3 layers of value. You've got the user, the social, and the economic or financial value. And at each stage of developing a new digital thing, you can kind of measure if these things are intertwined, and it goes along with the organization's development. So is the organization kind of supporting this new tech thing that's being built? Is there buy-in? Is the senior team on board? And the technology development as well. So is there more kind of resource allocated to technology and digital? Is it robust? Is it secure? Is the safeguarding stuff appropriately met? All of that kind of thing. And you've got these different stages that we have kind of quite a nice model for. So if anyone is wanting to fund any digital products, then let me know, because we can help you sort of assess them. And yeah, this idea of tech for good, what we mean by it is this convergence of the amazing new technologies that we have that are out there that are changing everything. Whether that's just Wi-Fi being available everywhere, location-based things where you can send the right things to the right people depending on where they are, or it could be all kinds of different approaches with tech, even from the humble SMS text message. The design approaches of this very user-centered and test-driven process, iterating as we go along, and really reimagining how we address these big, complex social challenges. That's what we call Tech for Good. I also co-lead the Tech for Good meetup in London, so if any of you want to find out more about Tech for Good as a movement, do come along, because we're always looking for more people from different areas of this sector to get involved and share their learnings, because you are all amazing domain experts, and that would be so valuable for the community to understand your challenges and how you're tackling them at the moment as well. So just a quick bit on how we're currently doing this at CAST. We work with established nonprofits, as I said. We run a digital fellowship program, which Dominic has been on, which is an 8-week course of half-day workshops around those different aspects that were on that Mentimeter list. And it's helping these leaders understand how they can address digital challenges, or how they can just become robust organizations in this constantly changing context. How they can continually respond to this change. And these are the organizations we've got on board so far. You might recognize that one. We're working with them at the moment to design, following the learning sessions, to design new approaches that they can use to deliver services more appropriately through some digital methods. We've also run a number of these workshops we call design hops, which are 1-day workshops or half-day workshops where we get people excited about the potential, basically. We help them unpack some of their challenges, understand where digital might fit, because it's not for everyone and it's not for every situation. We are the first to say that. It's not always relevant. And if there is a situation where, having understood your challenge really thoroughly, you realize that, in fact, a completely non-digital approach is the most appropriate, then that's great. That's totally cool. You know, it's just understanding maybe when digital might be relevant and appropriate. And then we run this accelerator program for established charities as well, which is a 3-month intensive course where someone from a nonprofit will have a tech team built around them and a product design team built around them. And for the first month and a half, really, they'll just focus on what problem it is they want to solve and really nail that. And speaking to their users, their end beneficiaries, they'll understand the different facets of that problem and refine the problem until they're really, really sure what the thing is that they are trying to achieve. And then they'll start prototyping, designing small versions of a digital solution that might help solve that problem for that user, and testing it as they go, and then finally building it into a bit more of a sort of a product, a very sort of rough around the edges product, but something that can be taken further and tested. And it fuses this kind of approach from the startup land and the tech community with the reach and the reputation and the strength of the established nonprofit, which is a huge asset. And it gives us just such a great head start, because startups would dream for access to these people that you guys work with all the time, or the people you fund are working with directly all the time. And they'd also dream for an understanding of the complexity of the challenges these people face, but they often don't have it. So I think actually our sector has a huge advantage, and if we just understand how to use these approaches, we can do some really, really exciting things. And so some of the things, that's just like how our Fuse process works. So these are some of the organisations we've worked with on our accelerator so far, so some pretty big charities down to some much smaller ones. And these are a couple of the things that we've created. We created an app with breast cancer care that helped women who had come through breast cancer then understand how to get support from other survivors of breast cancer. And there was already a forum where people could leave support, but a lot of those supportive messages and tips on what to do to make yourself feel better on a really dark day would get buried in the forum, and not everybody used the forum or accessed it. So this was sort of an app that pulled out different great suggestions, and women can flick through different suggestions of things to do. So it could be like, try a yoga class, or go and meet your friend for coffee, and here's a suggestion of this person's blog who tried a new approach to, I don't know, so they learned a new skill or something. And you can flick through them, which ones are relevant to you, which ones maybe aren't so relevant to you. And they've just had about a year of developing this thing very, very closely with the survivors that they work with, understanding what categories are they actually most interested in. We've got beauty, blogs, concerns as well, creative energy, exercise, and just the format of it is a lot more interactive and enjoyable to use, I suppose, really, than the standard kind of forum concept. So, but that's now been tested with over 2,000 women and has really, really positively been responded to. And we're continuing to develop that and iterate and make it better. The other one here we've got from Action for Children. They wanted to help some of their parental centres in a threat of being closed down, and so people need to be able to access experts, Action for Children, ask them questions when maybe their local service isn't around anymore to do so. So we've created a series of different online ways to get in touch and to have that conversation. Also from our digital fellowship, last year we built this site for Quaker Social Action, which helps raise awareness about the cost of funerals, which is something that a lot of people don't realise is so high. I wouldn't have known. £6,974 is the cost of a burial in London, the average cost. And funeral poverty is very real, and it's something that was part of a campaign they were running. And this tool just allows you to interact with different regions, select different types of funeral. There's another part where you can kind of create a DIY funeral, and it helps just people prepare for the costs that are likely to run into. And then this most recent one is an organisation we've been working with on our most recent digital fellowship called Unlock, who help people with criminal convictions. And one of the big challenges their users faced was understanding if they could travel to America in particular, and if so, what they needed, because often a criminal conviction can be very, well, can stop you being able to travel in some cases. So we just created a little chat function that added to this information site they already had. This is very early stages. This was literally created in 3 days, but it's just a way of going back to people and testing. You can interact with it. You can put like where you're traveling to America. It tells you, it kind of prompts you on what other information it needs to be able to tell you what you need to be thinking about and what ESTAs and visas and stuff you need. But it's just a different way of interacting, which is responding to the way that people are now expecting to get information a lot more. I'm going to whiz through some of this stuff because it's a bit kind of dull, but sorry. I'll share the slides afterwards. And I'd much rather hear your questions and input. But this bit is more important, is working with the funders that we do. About half our work actually is working with funders of charities and nonprofits, and all kinds of different types of funders. These are some of the ones we've worked with recently from trusts and foundations. This was a piece of research that we partnered with an organisation called Shift to understand how funders can best fund digital approaches. So I'm not sure if any of you, if this might be relevant for any of you, but if you're looking at, if any of your communities have new pieces of tech that they want to build and you're not quite sure how to assess that or how to measure the progress of it, then this is a really nice report that looks at a huge number of how these things have developed over time and different funders that have approached it. And as you can see, it's all these little loops are kind of iteration, and then the sort of developing a valid concept being the first stage, then establishing a proven solution, and then the scaling bit, the bit that's really exciting and meaty. And these are some of the funders that were involved, which is probably a bit too small to read, but Nominet Trust, Big Lottery, Paul Hamlin, Guys and St Thomas Charity, Esme Fairbairn, and Comic Relief. And these are the different stages of the Tech for Good kind of development process, I suppose, that they each fund. And we're really keen to help more funders and more different funders, so benevolent funds, for example, understand how they can use tech in their work as well. And so this is another couple of examples that we've done with people that I think might be quite relevant to you guys. For Esme Fairbairn, one of their biggest challenges was they get a load of applications that are ineligible, and it takes them so much time. Does anyone else have that challenge, sort of sifting through ineligible applications? So it turned out that they had a quiz on their website that helped people understand whether they were eligible or not for Esme's funding, but it was 60 questions long, which is really quite big for something that, I mean, the completion rate wasn't very high, put it that way. So we helped them sort of just create a much simpler one, which is actually has been really well received so far, where depending on what your answers are, you'll then get different types of question. And it'll be very short. I think the maximum number of steps is around 10. So it takes some of the detail out, but it keeps a lot of it in by just having more clever pathways that different information only shows if you answer certain things. So this one, for example, if your organization's annual turnover is over 50,000, and you say, actually, no, it's not, then you'll just get this message immediately being like, well, actually, we only really support organizations whose turnover is over 50,000. And then at that point, you can kind of get signposted to other organizations that might be more relevant. So just little things like this, where you've got different ways of almost triaging the applications, can be really useful. This is another thing we did for Comic Relief to help visualize some of the different funders that different funding that they've been giving, the different sections. These are the red are the funded, the pink are unsuccessful, and the blue are unsuccessful but got onto the long list. And just having a quick snapshot of the different focuses and therefore what the differences were in what stage people got to, I think was really helpful for them to understand who they were funding. And we did where the organisations were based in the UK, so luckily the red ones are quite nicely spaced out around the UK, which was one of their aims. So they could kind of then explain to people that they were pretty representative. And evaluation frameworks as well. This is something we did for UFI Charitable Trust. I know a lot of people are, obviously, evaluation is always a bit of a challenge, and it's something that the CAST team have done quite a lot of. So working with organisations to understand how to design an evaluation framework that works for them based on the processes they've currently got and the skills they've currently got in-house, is something else that we think is useful. And here's another one that we use internally at CAST, where you might recognise that one. When we're actually giving funding or supporting new digital products, we kind of use this matrix to see how they're doing in the different areas that we think are important. And we're really happy to share all of these approaches because it's not a field that there is a lot of support or research in at the moment. I think people are still getting to grips with it. And we're all learning together. So equally, if any of you have approaches that you think are really helpful, then we want to know. we want to all sort of build these things. So yeah, are you a grant maker wanting to get to grips with digital? If so, we would love to start developing something that works for you guys, that addresses your particular needs in grant making and in just understanding digital in general, really. And yeah, I'm really happy to work on this model of small iterations of developing something, testing it, and creating something hopefully of real value to the group here to help everybody deliver more impact. So yeah, that's me. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Ellie. Now you know what I had to experience for 8 weeks, an avalanche of enthusiasm and ideas. And it's just worth saying, I mean, ACO thinks it's identified a really important partner around this important area, and it is digital for good, tech for good, sorry. So this is not a commercial concern trying to sell you something. They will charge you, but or they will charge us, but to sell you something that you don't want. As you can see from the presentation, it's about working collaboratively alongside organisations. Feel it's probably a real issue for funders such as yourselves to be able to confidently enter into this area that we can no longer avoid engaging with. We've got time for about 10 minutes of questions. Same rules, really. If you put your hand up, we'll pass you the microphone. You don't have to introduce yourself, and you can ask Ellie any questions you want. Have we got a first taker?
I'm exhausted. just let me go and have lunch.
Well, this is unusual. Okay. Hang on, could you just wait for the microphone? Thank you.
I thought that was really interesting, and I've sort of been scribbling down notes. In terms of working, if an organisation wants to work with the organisation, roughly what are the kind of costs involved to either look at an existing system or start up a new sort of project?
It really depends on what kind of thing you want to do. That we do the different programs I mentioned. We also just do kind of one-off consulting kind of projects with different organizations. I think the cost, a sort of ballpark cost for a fellowship type program is about 5,000 to give you a sense of how, and that would be all the different areas covered, and you'd get to work with some developers to develop a new digital thing. If you wanted to do just a quick inquiry, then we've done workshops like those design hop type workshops, anywhere between I think 1,500 and 3,000, and that gives you a kind of a starting point. So yeah, it would really depend who on our team you need and what you want to do. But we're very happy to kind of discuss completely non-charged to figure out what it is that you need. Yeah. We offer, one thing I should have said, we offer an office hours system at the moment to help us kind of deal with inquiries and help people just get a sense of what we can offer and how digital might help them. So every other Friday, you can book a slot through our office hours system just by emailing us at hello@wearecast.org.uk. And then you'll get to speak to one of our team for half an hour about anything you want, really. Can be about us, can be about a challenge you've got. Just ask for some free advice. So yeah.
You were talking about elephants in the room, or the white elephant. Sorry,
elephants, yeah.
But you're also talking about offering sometimes a skateboard and what have you. Different. Do you find that it's challenging working with organizations that might have many kind of legacy systems and databases, and how you can motivate them, and how do you motivate them to move them on and away? Because I've often come across organizations that might have 3 different databases or what have you, and how do you move them on?
Absolutely, that is a huge challenge. We worked with an organisation just last week that had 7 different websites which all had data in 7 different databases, and they were trying to figure out how to get that into one usable place. It is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, especially of the larger organizations. A lot of it is about understanding what's like prioritizing what particular problem you're trying to solve to move that forward, and understanding we work a lot with the sort of the internal hierarchies within organizations to make sure that whoever needs to make those decisions is able to do so, and whoever needs to get the information they need can do so. So that, when we worked with National Childbirth Trust, they had a really big legacy system, and a lot of the problem with that was just a lot of people maybe not understanding where to go next, and there was a bit of inertia around making those maybe sometimes quite difficult decisions about what to do. So sometimes it's just about sort of bumping people out of that little rut, and helping them make a really coherent plan for what to do next, and kind of taking the pressure off, I suppose, that actually you don't have to have the answer of how you're going to change this legacy system into something really useful. You can just try something, you can test it, and then if it's working, improve on that. Sometimes we have abandoned systems altogether because they're a bit of a lost cause, because there's sometimes lots of things bolted onto each other where actually it's then causing the team a lot more time in copying and pasting things from one part to the other. And what they need is a completely fresh system that's going to work for the new way that they operate. Sometimes you can kind of evolve things and help them along, but it's really different in each organization. But a lot of it is about that kind of organizational culture around it and the decision-making process. I think a lot of it comes down to that.
Is there a last question from anybody before we wrap this session up? Yeah, there is one there, sorry.
Wait till you got the first.
He was right next to you.
Thank you. Can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of balance of the organisation in terms of consultancy versus development? Is it all in-house development? Do you do more consultancy and then look to establish the right providers elsewhere? What's the balance of the work?
So we work as a networked organisation very much. Our core team is very small. So we work with different development and design agencies and freelancers and partners, basically, depending on who is best placed to work with the organisations we're working with. So we have on our team kind of head of design, lots of product, people who understand product and user research very thoroughly. And we currently do have a couple of developers as well, but we've actually found that it's more useful to have a bit more of a flexible development relationship, because developers come in so many shapes and sizes, and same with designers and agencies, and finding one that's right for each organization that we're working with is actually really quite nuanced and tricky, but it's an important thing to do. So we work with whoever is appropriate, I suppose, for that organization, depending on what they're looking to build. If it's a database, it'll be a very different type of partner to a front-end web app on mobile or something like that.
So it really is more about trying to help organisations understand the tech that they want and then helping them to find the right solution.
A little bit, yeah. Well, we'll kind of hold people's hands through the whole process. Yep. I think the thing that we found is that the reason we start with that beginning bit is because that's where things most frequently fail at the moment. People are going, we've got a tool actually which I can share called a conversation menu, which helps tech partners and charities and funders have more productive relationships by just having a series of questions they should ask when they engage with each other at the very beginning. So it's things like, who owns the tech? And if this is open source, what does that mean? What license is it? And what's the sign-off process? And all these things that we've seen from our experience, people don't ask often until it's quite a long way down the line, and then the communication breaks down. But yeah, at that very beginning bit of diagnosing what the problem is and what you actually need to build is the bit that's really hard, actually, and takes a lot of time and thought and space. And so that's kind of where we focus our bit, but we very much work with partners that do all the other bits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just wait for the mic. Well, thank you very much, Ellie. We really appreciate that. There'll be more information available next year about how we might take this whole subject forward. We next meet on the 27th of February, and rather like the complexities of digital, we're focusing on a very technical area then. Should tell you that we're making February 2018 GDPR month. That must be the first time GDPR got a cheer. I'm very, thank you very much. That's very gratifying. GDPR is coming, and we're all very afraid. And if we're not, we probably should be.